Hi everyone, welcome back. We're down at work again today. I just thought I'd give you an update on where we're up to with our little F14 that we're restoring. We pulled the cylinder head off it, and three of the cylinders look really good. This one's got just a small little ridge on the top here. The cylinder's in pretty good condition, so is the back one. This one's had a little bit of moisture in it at some point. This one here doesn't look real great at all. There's a bit of pitting around here where the piston was sitting, and it's had some water in it. I wonder if somebody's already been in here and had a go at cleaning it up to try and get this tractor running. That was probably back in the 1950s or 60s that was done. And it may well have been running since then. But generally, the engine doesn't look too bad at the moment, except for the top third of this cylinder here. So we're probably just going to scrape the ridge off the top with the ridge scraping tool, give the cylinders a hone, or take the pistons out, give the cylinders a hone, and put some new piston rings in. For such a worn out tractor, as I believe this was, the engine's actually in much better shape than I had thought. It's also got some corrosion in really strange places. So these are two of the nuts that came off from holding the head on, and you can see there's almost nothing left of these. So it's spent a lot of time out in the weather and has a fair amount of corrosion on it. So here's the pile of bits that we've removed already, and there were a few things that I was a bit surprised about. This is the cap off the oil breather. If I hold it up to the light, you'll see that there's holes rusted straight through that, and on the rocker cover there's two holes rusted through here too, which I was not expecting to find. Usually these don't rust out too badly, but in this case it has. This is the cylinder head, and although it's very dirty, you can see here where the holes in the rocker cover were rusted through about here. It's got an awful lot of dirt in here, which we're going to have to clean up. But other than that, it's not too bad. All the valves move, although they all do leak. I checked this before I took the cylinder head off, simply by putting my hand over both the exhaust and the intake at different times, and then turning the engine over on the crank handle, and I could feel it puffing back out through the intake and sucking in through the exhaust. This is a really good simple way just to check whether your valves are sealing properly or not. So I'll turn it around and we'll have a look. We can see a bit of black carbon build up in there. That's usual. These marks here are just where there's holes in the water jacket in the block, but they're not actually cast through the head. You quite often see these, and I'm not quite sure why they turn up, but they're not uncommon. These two cylinders here, you can see a little bit of corrosion on them from a little bit of moisture getting in there, but everything else at the moment doesn't look too bad. That valve feels like it's probably going to be a little bit thin, and that one. So we'll strip this head down and have a look at it and see what it looks like inside. So one of the first things we want to do with the cylinder head is to remove these two studs here. So you can use double nuts and lock them onto here and try and get them out. Often that's not particularly successful. So because they don't have thread all the way down them, you can grip them with a pair of vice grips. These aren't the best vice grips to be using. And they're not going to move. Yes, they are. Look at that, they're going to come out. Now the vice grips do mark your studs, so don't ever grip them on the thread. Always grip them below the thread, where it doesn't matter too much if they get a little bit of marking on them from the teeth on the vice grips. Okay, so next we want to start removing the valves. It's important to keep all of these in the same order so they go back in the same spot when you're reassembling it. One thing I like to do is just get a piece of cardboard, I for intake, E for exhaust, cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4, and the valves just go in some holes that I've punched in the cardboard. That's the way I find really easy to keep track of the valves. Now often the valve heads will be a different size on the intake and the exhaust. The exhaust often has a smaller head than the intake. However, these ones are the same size, so we also need to know which is the intake and the exhaust. I've just had a quick look at the intake and exhaust manifold, so I know that that one and that one is are exhaust valves, and that this one and this one are the intake valves. So it goes exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust. A lot of engines have different orders to that. You just need to work it out when you're pulling it apart. Sometimes the exhaust valves are rated at a higher temperature, so they need to go back in as the exhaust. Sometimes the valves are exactly the same and it actually doesn't matter where you put them. But it's a good idea to always try and keep them the way to put them back where you got them from. Now we're going to be using this tool here. This is a spring compressor to take the valve springs off. It's a simple tool. There's a handle here. This bit here is adjustable, so this bit here sits on the top spring retainer. This bit here is adjustment for how thick your head is and how long the valve stem is. We put this bit over the base of the valve. We put this bit sitting on the head of the valve, and we pull down on the lever. It squashes this spring up, and then there's two little collets in here that we've got to be very careful that we don't lose. Every now and then they fall out on the floor, and you spend the next couple of hours on the floor on your hands and knees trying to find them. So that's one little collet. Sometimes these get a bit sticky too. I find that a scriber is quite a good tool for getting in there and helping me. You can also use a little fine screwdriver. So they're the two collets. We release the spring compressor. You've got your spring retaining cap, your valve spring, and then the valve should just slide out, and there's your valve. And this one doesn't look too bad. So we'll put that in our piece of cardboard and we'll move on to the next one. Cylinder head here. So if we look down into the ports here, this one here still has a nice shiny seat on it, which is good. We're not going to need to do too much with that one. We will lap it in. This one has a pretty pitted rusty seat in it. This one looks pretty ordinary too. In fact, I think this is the best looking one. Now there's a fair bit of carbon in here. We're just going to use a wire brush on a drill, little small wire brush on a drill, and we're just going to clean up in there. We need to be very careful with this surface here, that we don't damage this. This is the sealing surface that has to seal against the block. Just looking here, there's a little mark there that I wondered if the head gasket was blowing a little bit, but no, it actually looks all right. Down in the water jacket doesn't look too bad on this either, interestingly. often you get a lot more corrosion build up, scale and stuff in there. So overall the head doesn't look too bad. To clean the carbon and build up out of the combustion chamber here, we just use a wire brush like this on a drill, and we can get right in, down into all the ports as far as we can and just get as much of the carbon out as we can. A little bit of carbon left in here isn't a big problem. If there's too much in here, as the engine warms up, this stuff cracks off. It can get caught under a valve which holds the valve open, but also it can just get blown out the exhaust. And in Western Australia in summer, if that happens and it lands on the dry grass, that is a really good way to start up a bushfire. It usually only happens when the engines are working hard and you get a temperature change between the cast iron and the carbon. But yeah, we'll just give this a quick clean up and get a little bit more of it off. I've cleaned a fair bit off already, but we just like this. Now we don't want to use the wire brush on the surface of the head. Even though this is a brass wire brush, these are a bit deceptive. They're actually a brass plated steel bristle on these. And if we get too stuck into it and too carried away, we can put scratches and we can actually wear away the metal, and we can cause low patches which can cause the head gasket to blow either between cylinders or the water jacket. So we don't want to put anything rotary that spins on here because we risk damaging the head. I make up these scrapers. These are an old power hacksaw blade. They're a bit hard to get now because very few people still use power hacksaws, but these make brilliant scrapers for scraping gaskets off and carbon off, and these are really good for cleaning up head surfaces and gasket surfaces. Next, we're going to cut the valve seats. Now, none of the seats in here look too bad. They're all pretty good, but we're just going to give them a light. That one's got a little bit of rust and pitting on it. We're just going to give them a quick light cut with a valve seat cutter. This is a New Way valve seat cutter. These are brilliant. I got these second hand fairly cheap. They are pretty expensive to buy new. I also have a cheap set of cutters which do almost the same thing but not nearly as well. I would recommend, if you can find a second-hand set of these and you're going to be doing a few of them, get the good ones instead of the cheap ones. The good ones do a much better job. So to cut the valve seats, there's a mandrel here which fits in the valve guide so that we get them square. We put the mandrel in. Just move the piece of wood that's behind it. We do the mandrel up tight so that it's held firm in the valve seat. The cutters each have two different angles on them. There's some other cutters here too which have a really steep angle and a really flat angle. Depending on what sort of engine you're doing up and what sort of valves they have in them. Some engines have 3 different angles on the seat, and so the valve is only sealing on a very narrow part of the seat. This is to do with heat transfer and all of that sort of thing. These ones are pretty basic engines, so it looks to me as though they have just 2 different angles on here. They've got the 2 angles that are on here. This just helps with the valve seat sealing. So these are cutting faces on here. They're replaceable cutting faces. So we slide it onto the mandrel. We just give it a quick turn by hand and we take it off and have a quick look and see how our seat looks. Now I can see, no, that's a shadow. That looks pretty good like that. It's as simple and quick as that. This one has very good valve seats already, so we don't need to take too much off. After we've done all of these, we'll lap the valves in with a bit of valve grinding paste. So to lap the valves in, we need some valve grinding paste. This comes in small little packets like this. One end is fine, one end is coarse. It's basically a mixture of oil and sand. Some sort of abrasive sand. So we take the valve that we want, and for the cylinder we want to lap it in. Make sure that you put a bit of oil on the stem. We need to lubricate this while we're lapping it in, and a little bit of oil around the seat as well. Then we want a little tiny bit of valve grinding paste. This stuff's gone a bit hard while it's been sitting over time. Oops. Put a little bit of valve grinding paste around the seat. Around the face of the valve, not around the seat, around the face of the valve. Drop it into the valve hole. Wipe the oil off the top. You don't want too much oil on the face of the valve. It's going to be a little bit hard to see the valve itself. And then we need one of these little sucky tools. This just sticks onto the head of the valve and allows us to hold it properly. A little bit of water on the suction cup there so it seals. A little bit of spit works fine. Stick it on and just rub it like that. Pick it up and bang it. That helps all the grit get back onto the face, and you might be able to hear it grinding, and then it sort of gets finer. So we want to just keep working away at it like that until wipe this clean, and you can see where it has been cutting. It's got a new, more shiny piece of area of steel on it, and we want it. These valves are actually very good. So we can see here, this has got a little bit of pitting just around here, and it hasn't quite lapped across the full surface. We just want to keep working away at each valve until it has lapped across the full surface of contact. Once we've done that, we can wash down the head, make sure we get all the grit out, and then we can reassemble it. So I'm going to keep working away at this, and I hope you've learned something from this, and I hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much. Bye.